It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
This is a special edition of Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, and joining me today, as always, Mr. Michael Becker. Michael, how are you?
We're hunkered down, quarantined. What's going on with you?
I am quarantined at my side of the world, and I know that you're quarantined on your side of the world. And so this is some crazy times that we're participating in. And so, again, this is a special edition of Ask Mike Mondays because we are recording this on Friday, March the 20th. And things are very fluid at this period of time. So we're going to just make some comments about what we see in the marketplace. And I thought, we've had to cancel all of our conferences for the next 60 to 90 days. So no 300 people to join us at Steve Brown for the Dallas Morning News, and probably not Dr. Mark Dotzer, 500 folks for the Dr. Mark Dotzer, The Economist. So we're just feeling the pain like everybody about what's going on with the economy and apartments. So we ask these questions of Michael because Michael, as you know, owns thousands of apartment buildings, or thousands of apartment units and lots of apartment buildings, and he's probably the best person to talk to about what's going on with the apartment industry. His feet are right on the line about what's going on. So, Michael, how about if I start with this question? Mike, how bad is this coronavirus going to be on apartments?
I don't really know, Paul. I mean, I think it's going to obviously have quite a bit of wide-reaching ramifications in every segment of every part of the economy. So I think we're obviously going to have our fair share of issues in the multifamily space. So, kind of as we record this midday on March 20th, I think we're preparing kind of for quite a bit of unknown, quite a bit of delinquency as we go into April. So far, March collections have been kind of normalized. Most of our assets basically all our assets are stabilized. So everything's pretty stable, kind of the 90s from 90s kind of plus occupancy across the board. We're not over levered. I think generally speaking, kind of going into this, we had pretty modest leverage across the board on the portfolio, and we don't have any predatory kind of bridge lenders, kind of the loan to own type lenders that a lot of other people have had over the last year or two, when those those high leverage bridge products started coming back with quite a bit of popularity. So I feel like we're walking into this about as good as we can. But I'm kind of feeling that as of this recording, or as of yesterday, we kind of shut down our offices to the public. So we shut down all the common area amenities earlier in the week, and as of yesterday, we were shut to the public. So if you were a resident or had an appointment, we can kind of deal with you. Kind of still deal with move-ins, move-outs, but any sort of leasing had to be done online. Scheduled appointments, we're just not allowing people to walk in the office. So that's kind of what we've done there. We've put together some contingency plans for maintenance as well. Maintenance are kind of still on site, and before anyone's going into units, one, we're requesting that the residents only do emergency maintenance issues. So like the AC's out, water overflowing, clogged sinks, stuff like that. Any sort of kind of routine maintenance, we're trying to hold off on as much as possible. And then before we let any of the maintenance guys in the units, we're asking the residents, some basic questions like, are you sick? Or you come in contact with anyone else that's sick? Have you traveled out of the country? Things like that. So we're trying to do our best to limit the exposure for the maintenance guys inside the units. As well as we have some contingency plans that if everything gets really shut down, that we're going to hopefully have some maintenance guys kind of as like on-demand crews that go from property to property, dealing with HVAC issues and the like, as kind of get further into the warmer weather here in Texas, and try to run a lot of this kind of off-site. Earlier in the week, we ordered 30 to 60 days ahead on maintenance supplies, just to make sure that we have parts and things from the most common issues that we have, trying to make sure we have those on hand before the maybe potential supply chain disruption, because the materials are available now. So we just want to make sure we do our best to try to get everything we can. And then, we're fully prepared come, about 2 weeks from now when rent is due, that we expect to have a, material increase in delinquencies. all the municipalities across the country basically will not allow any sort of foreclosures for the next, 60, 90 days. So we are foreclosures and eviction. So we expect that a lot of residents that have been impacted and lost their jobs, they just simply won't be able to pay. And I fear that a lot of people that still has the ability to pay know they can't be evicted. So I think they'll have, incentive to not pay us, at least until this kind of gets some sort of clarity in the situation. So I think we're going to see quite a bit of pain coming up from a collection standpoint, Paul. So that's kind of what we're preparing for.
So my take is I think this is a complete disaster. It's not a financial crisis. It's not a banking crisis. This is really a health crisis. So a complete black swan event that's going to impact our life and your business. I think we divided into 3 different questions, like we were talking about: operations, financing in the future for the Class B and C apartments. But the number one thing, and I think you've just touched upon it, is really keep your employees and your tenants safe. And it sounds like you guys are doing a good job with that. So the first thing is, what's going to happen with operations? And I see a 30 to 35% decline in net rental income in May. Yep, but I'm predicting 30 to 35%. I think that April will be okay, but not great. But May is when the whammy is going to hit. So we're getting that information from third-party property management conversations around the state of Texas. Also, we're hearing that the unemployment claims are going to rise to 30%. So just like what Mike says, there may be a lot of people that living in these apartments that may not have been working, but we just don't know if it's going to last for 6 months or if it's going to last for 18 months. So we're just worried about net rental income for the month of May and going forward. Other thing is that we're concerned with the partnerships not really having enough cash on cash return, even in the good months. And now that we're going to be impacted when we have less revenue than expenses, what's going to happen with that? So I see current syndications stopping distributions to limited partners. Cash is king going forward into this type of a recession. So I see a few quarters of distribution stopped, no matter what you have with cash on hand. I see a reduction of personnel on site. Have you guys started to lower some of your personnel costs, Mike?
What we're doing, kind of preparing for, is try to, reduce as much expenses as possible. So far we haven't obviously laid anyone off, but any sort of hiring is put on hold for sure, and then at some point we're going to have to, likely reduce hours and or staffing, in particular in the office with like leasing agents. So, kind of what I project, Paul, is everyone's going to basically hunker down. So I'm assuming that the leasing traffic's just going to, go to little to none. And, a lot of the people that, hopefully this will be a big weekend. We have several properties got a lot of scheduled move-ins. So far, no one's canceled their move-ins. But I expect here in the near term, people will kind of cancel any sort of move-ins that they had scheduled, and people will cancel the move-outs, and everyone just kind of stays put. So if you're in a stabilized deal, you're probably going to be okay from at least a physical occupancy standpoint. If you're in a deal that's unstable, or you're in the middle of a big reposition, the 80s, or if you're a brand new deal that's in the middle of lease up, I think you're gonna have some hard time attracting tenants. So I think everyone's basically kind of stay where they're at, and then we'll see what actual money comes in the door. My prediction is that we'll have more pain, and the lower the property grade, the more the collection issues will kind of surface. Because if you think about it, the tenant profile in a C-class deal is, most of these people work some form of a blue collar or restaurant server type of job. So they have to be, physically doing something at a place to get income, where, potentially at like a nicer Class A deal, someone could work from home and still receive a paycheck. So I think the collection issues obviously will be a little bit more pronounced the lower the property grade, but I think every asset's going to be impacted to some degree or another. So I think that's going to be certainly a challenge, and I think everyone just kind of hunkers down. So yeah, we'll either have to reduce hours or reduce staff in the office at some point in the not too distant future. I think everyone's trying to get their arms around it. Yeah, we're clearly going to start suspending distributions. We can also kind of talk here in a minute about what we're kind of preparing to do with our lenders and try to be as proactive as possible as well. But I think certainly, cut expenses, make sure that we prepare, save all the cash, do things like that are kind of very prudent first steps.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up an important point about the lack of traffic. So the management companies that I'm speaking with are very concerned about the lack of traffic coming into the office the last 2 weeks. So in a good week, they'd usually have 15 or 20 folks just walk in. Today, they're seeing about 2. So potential tenants are just not there. They're not walking in. So if you lose a tenant, current tenant, it's going to be damn near impossible to fill that unit quickly. And if you do, is there going to be a concession? As you talked about before, evictions are going to be a challenge. Some municipalities have brought in restrictions on evictions, and some courthouses are closed. So you can't even file to get a tenant evicted because the courthouses are closed. So there's going to be challenges from non-paying tenants in the future. Another thing is that, and I don't know you have to go out, if you are a general partner, explain the situation to your limited partners. I mean, you just can't put up the distributions without having a commentary or a discussion with them, because they have to understand that we're all in this together, that this property, this investment they're in, is that if we have an issue of not collecting enough money, that we may have to have a capital call. And I know that some people would be concerned about that. So best idea is really to shut off distributions for at least the next few quarters and kind of go with that. Also, if they don't have enough income in, I would think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are in the next week or two are going to come up with, say, some forbearance agreements. And Mike, what is a forbearance agreement?
Yeah, so what we're kind of anticipating, I was told that we should see something kind of early next week. So, the week of the 23rd of March, we should hopefully start seeing something kind of Fannie Mae, and I would imagine Freddie Mac at the same time. And then, all the various other lenders will be kind of following suit. But we expect, forbearance. So, most likely you'll expect that your mortgage payments for April and May most likely will be deferred. And essentially any sort of interest that you might owe for those months, I expect that they'll just kind of defer those payments and tack the interest that you would have owed onto basically the principal balance, and it'll be kind of due when you eventually sell or refinance their mortgage. Which, if they do that, I'll be super excited to take that all day, every day right now, and just kind of kick the can down the road until the back end of the deal. So that's kind of what I expect to see coming out, because obviously, if our tenants don't have jobs, they can't pay us rent. If we don't get rent, we can't pay our mortgage. And if we can't pay our mortgage, then they literally, it's just not us. It's the entire, country is grounding to a halt. So I'd imagine, the lenders just can't foreclose on everybody. So they're going to have to forbear, forgive, and allow some flexibility for the landlords out there across the country. So, one of the things we're doing to kind of be proactive is I pulled together a T12, a rent roll, and a balance sheet. So I'm going to go through and kind of explain to my lender, here's my situation, kind of ask them what their plan is, and, kind of go open kimono, kind of full disclosure with them. Here's my cash position. Here's my payables position. This is where we sit. Fortunately, most of our assets are in pretty good shape. One or two are a little tighter than I would probably prefer them to be, but generally speaking, across the board, we're not over levered. We have some liquidity in our entities, et cetera. We don't really have a bunch of accrued payables, anything like that. So we're just going to kind of show them where we sit, and and then kind of depending on collections, see if we can go ahead and just forbear on April and May out of the gate. So if they're going to offer that, I'm going to take it right out of the gate, and then kind of, go lender by lender and go there. But I'm going to provide them all that information. And then next week, as I start sending out my monthly reports, my plan is, I've already communicated with everyone kind of what the basic plan is, but I'm going to go, property by property, and kind of give that same data, kind of our liquidity position, our payable position, and then, kind of make sure everyone's aware that, distributions are off for the foreseeable future. And we're going in kind of foxhole mode and hunker down and try to preserve as much cash. Because I think at some point, if you get into trouble and your lender is looking to work at you, especially if it's not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, especially if it's like a regional bank or a balance sheet lender, and ultimately your lender realizes that, come April, you're paying out distributions, Even though everything's falling apart, I think you'll have a lot less sympathy with your lender. So I think, at this point, if you pay anything out, it'll probably come back and bite you in the future with your lender. So I would certainly wait and see and, hoard cash for the moment.
Yeah, biting probably would mean a lockbox, which means that that money goes in and then the checkbook gets handed over to the servicer, and the servicer starts to write the checks out because they can't trust you to not pay your limited partners. So I would try to avoid that. They have the servicer write and be in control of your checkbook, and also prepare to prioritize payables. That should, this is I'd open up communications with your vendors, making sure that everybody wants to be paid, but find out any ways to negotiate a discount. And then I would also frantically improve website and digital marketing, just like we talked about before. With the lack of traffic, you're going to still need to market your property, but if you haven't done a good job with your website and digital marketing, it's going to be difficult for people to take a look and see who you are to even rent out that space. So we really don't know what's going to happen with when people and tenants lose their jobs. Class B and C tenants are the first ones to feel the job loss because these folks are cash flow tenants. So if they don't have the cash money in their wallet or purse, they just can't pay you. So our tenants usually don't have a large savings account or any sort of a fallback. So just know that. And then I think maybe you mentioned it. Have you stopped rehabbing some of your properties, Michael?
Oh yeah, the other thing that we've done is basically any sort of unit upgrades that were in process. We're just finishing those units off, but all future upgrades for now have been suspended. Any sort of capital projects that aren't absolutely dire or like required by the city, those are going on hold right now. So we're not going to have any more carpentry and paint and things like that. We're just kind of trying to do our best to just preserve as much cash as possible, and anything that's not a life and safety or immediate thing is definitely going on hold, and kind of just do basic unit turns versus upgrades just to hoard cash. I fully expect to see probably some sort of retreat in rental rates at some point, Paul, when the traffic comes back on. On renewals, obviously we're going flat to negative in most cases. We're not trying to jam rental rate increases on our tenants in this time. So if we can kind of be flat to negative and just kind of manage for occupancy until we kind of see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, whether that be in 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, or can't imagine this goes on much more than 2-3 months, because at some point they're going to have to just kind of let everyone back out, or the entire world's going to crater at some point. So I think it's going to certainly be some pain in the short term. We'll see kind of how long and lingering it is. You hear a different variety of opinions, whether this is going to be next Great Depression to, a quick V-shaped recovery. And, as soon as we kind of get everyone back out in the general population, the economic activity goes back to kind of 2 weeks ago kind of level. And, I'm sure probably somewhere in between is probably the real answer at the end of the day.
So the question is really, is there financing available these days? And I think the answer is yes. Interest rates have come down. I think we're looking like a 12-year loan, maybe 3.75 to 4% in that range on, say, a $10 million transaction. They've taken away the streamlined early rate lock program, so you have to wait for at least until you have a loan commitment, which could be 45 days or so before you can rate lock these days. They're not granting any waivers on loans under $3 million. And then Fannie is starting to pull back on credit. So they really do not want to go above 75% LTV and are pulling back longer term IO. 2 to 3 years is doable depending on the location and the sponsor. So Fannie and Freddie, I think their doors are still generally open. I think the regional banks, I think are going to be challenged to have a regional lender right now step up.
How are you anticipating, because the way Fannie and Freddie have always underwritten are kind of on T3 collections, and so obviously everything January, February, March is normal, but once we start showing April and May, we expect to see collections drop off quite a bit. I think across the board, you think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are still going to hold the underwriting guidelines, and then that'll effectively limit leverage and availability of debt once we kind of start flowing through with those collections, or you think they're going to underwrite kind of more normalized situations?
The answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what's going to look like and how they're going to do it. They're just going to look at this as a blurb on the operating statement, or they're going to average it out into the deal. I would think they would just look at it as a one-time event for like next 3 to 6 months, if that's how long it's going to last. But I think we're going to see different, and this is kind of the future piece. I think we're going to see different pricing in the future. And so, if you haven't gotten a multifamily, maybe the future is going to be in the next 6 months. Take a look and see what the pricing is going to look like on multifamily. Things have changed. I mean, I think the smaller properties are good because you can kind of work those deals yourself and pay attention. But when it starts to become a larger property, 150 to 300 doors, it becomes a large business. You have to rely upon other people. It could be a challenge. And so I think your advice right from the beginning is don't buy in the hood, don't buy in challenging demographic areas. I think that's going to come back to help a lot of people that listened and heeded that advice, Michael.
Yeah, hopefully that does well, because obviously if you're in a really high crime area, those tenants don't have any means, even lesser than kind of stuff tenants in a low crime area don't have the means, the workforce housing, let alone the super high crime area. So then you're also going to have other challenges. And if you have a tenant profile that's will have some level of criminal element to it, and your municipalities won't let you evict anybody, I think you're going to be in for a long few months here if you own in the hood. So obviously everyone, we're all in this together, and everyone's going to work their way out of this one way or another. But hopefully, I'm hopeful that at the end of the day, we'll be proactive with our lenders. We'll be openly communicating with all our investors. We're going to foxhole it a little bit with cash and operations. And, hopefully we come out of this in a month or so, and the world kind of gets back to some semblance of normal, and we'll see what happens on pricing, whether this is just a temporary blip or there's a reset in the future. I'm unsure. So anyways, but I think everyone just needs to be real with their investors, be real with their lenders, make sure that we go ahead and start, hunkering down, get the cash in the bank, reduce your expenses, save every lease that's humanly possible. I think at the end of the day, every lease is going to be, super critical. So make sure you be, modest on your renewals, kind of flat to negative is what I would expect. And then, I think at the end of the day, we're gonna come out of this, and those that are, well-heeled and did the right things and were transparent with the lenders are going to work with them. Those that kind of put their head in the sand, those are the ones that are going to have some serious challenges. So, I'd be overly communicative. Everyone's going to understand, because this isn't something you caused. It's something the economy, the government literally shut the economy down. So it's not like you're going to be alone in this issues.
No, absolutely correct. And so we'll end it right there. So, Michael, thanks for your time. I appreciate that. We'll stay in contact with everybody and continue to look forward to sharing the information that we get in, so you can stay in front of this, just like Michael and I are. We're talking with a bunch of people and trying to figure out where this thing's going to go. So again, that was Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.